Well, it looks like this Bears offense may be on the cusp of developing an identity. Do you see the same?
I do. And I understand, the first reaction you're going to get is that they played against a subpar defense last week, which they did. But when you play against a subpar team, you should handle that football team. That's what the Bears did on both sides of the ball, but especially on the offensive side of the ball in terms of having run-pass balance. And more importantly, Dan, creating those explosive plays down the field. That was missing throughout the majority of those first football games we watched. And Caleb Williams hit 3 explosive play throws in this football game. That's a big jump.
What do you think is a play for them, other than what they call God's play, that the power run on the goal line? I've identified the successful draw plays they've run as something that they can begin to build their identity around. What else do you see?
The screen game with the running backs. Look what DeAndre Swift has done the last 2 weeks. 2 explosive plays on the screens, right? And Dan, you and I have talked about this throughout the season, and even before the season. Caleb Williams' ability to throw from multiple arm angles or multiple arm slots and to throw when he's off balance. It's a huge part of the screen game to be able to get the football out on time and to be able to get the football out when you have a muddy pocket that you're working in. That's a big part of it. But also, I think you have to continue to push the ball down the field. More third-level throws, because that can make this offense go. That can impact what type of coverage you're going to see, whether it's single high or two high. Again, that's a big part of what they can do.
Matt, we know that Jacksonville's defense is not very good. It hasn't been all season.
They have not.
So what exactly do you need to see this week compared to the last couple of weeks? Because, as you said, we know they're going up against teams that are lesser than, right? But we didn't know if they were lesser than. The Bears themselves, until they actually got back-to-back wins and got the offense untracked a little bit. So what needs to happen against this Jaguars team?
Well, understand what their coverage tendencies are and how to attack them. Jacksonville is very heavy two-high coverage. Now, it's a mix of cover 2 and 2-man. They're at 64% split safety coverage this year. Second most in the league, right? So Dan and I had this discussion earlier in the year. How do you beat split safety coverage? Multiple ways to do it. But I think this week, based on the tendencies you're going to see from Jacksonville and their personnel, can you attack the middle of the field? That's where the windows are going to be. Intermediate windows in front of those deep half safeties. How do you occupy or push those safeties down the field and create those intermediate windows? This should be a game where DJ Moore runs multiple in-breakers, where Cole Kmet is utilized that seam stretching option in the middle of the field, because that's where I think they have to attack.
And looking at Keenan Allen's presence here, are you able to directly say, okay, I see how his presence has opened things up from Caleb Williams and his ability to get things going offensively?
I think it has, and I think this is a game, too, where he can use his coverage awareness. If you're going to see zone coverage, especially too deep, where you can find the zone windows, where you can sit down, and based on the leverage of the defender, based on the depth of the defenders at the second level, and find those windows or find those pockets where you make yourself available to Caleb Williams, especially on third down situations. And if you get 2-man, he should be the one, again, in the middle of the field that can uncover. When you're playing 2-man, you have 2 deep safeties over the top, right? Underneath, you have man coverage defenders, but they're playing in a trail position. I call it to the low hip or to the bottom hip, because they got that help over the top. This is where Keenan Allen, especially in critical down and distance situations, can separate and get open, because I think that's something that we have to track as the season progresses, is who's that go-to target, not in terms of explosive plays, but in terms of moving the chains. I think it has to be Keenan Allen.
So let's go from the huddle break to the line of scrimmage. Caleb Williams is looking things over. He sees 2 deep safeties. Now, they're going to make their protection call, determining if they are in man or zone. Now, I know one of the ways that they can diagnose that is you'll see him pick up his leg and set his foot down, send somebody in motion, and see if he's followed. And if he's followed, your first instinct is man, unless he's following him as a decoy and he's going to run right back to his landmark. Is there anything other than that that can cue them in as to man or zone?
Well, the first thing, Dan, I always go to is empty formations. What empty formations do, obviously they spread the field, but they force defenses to declare much earlier. It's much harder to disguise against an empty set. You got 5 eligible receivers out there, and you can't hold your disguise for that long. That's one way to do it. And another way, like you said, using motion. And I also like using shifts with the running back. Okay, if you're in a 2-back set, or even a 1-back set, shift the running back out. Make him the backside X. One that gives you a matchup inside of its zone with now your boundary X receiver becomes your slot guy. But does someone follow him out there? Or does the corner just widen? If the corner widens, well, guess what? You're probably getting zone coverage. Those are basic things, but sometimes football doesn't have to be very complicated when you're trying to win the post or the pre-snap, chess match. And you can do simple things to make the coverage declare what they want to be.
You talk about not as complicated as it necessarily has to be. Back to the offensive line, we saw Bill Murray. Nate Davis seemingly has gone by the wayside for the time being. What do you make of where this offensive line is compared to maybe 3-4 weeks ago?
I think they have improved, especially in the run game blocking. I mean, that's the first thing you look at is can they run the ball efficiently? Do they give the running back a north-south track to hit? I think you've seen that develop over the last couple of weeks, and Caleb Williams has had cleaner pockets to throw from. Again, like we just talked about, it's not very complicated, right? Well, if you give Caleb Williams a clean pocket and you scheme up throws, so for example, the first touchdown throw to DJ Moore, okay, it's a longer developing route. Okay, so what you're doing is you're clearing out to the front side of the formation. You're running a post and a deep over. It's almost like a deep mesh concept. And so you have the deep over, and here comes DJ Moore and the deep crosser from the other side of the field. It's a long way for a DB to cover. You got to run a long way, but also you need protection to make that throw. You need protection because when you can protect and when you can scheme up a specific tendency, you're going to win a lot of games. You're going to win a lot of game situations. You're going to win a lot of plays. So those are the things you look at. Can they run the ball efficiently? And can they run longer developing routes where Caleb Williams needs time to see the coverage and to cut it loose?
All right, safety talk with the former safety. Jaquan Brisker has had a terrific start to the year, and we kept bringing up the fact that how reminiscent his game was of your guy Bob Sanders, and somebody who just was a fast-burning comet through the sky, and the body could only sustain so much. We'll see if that's true with Brisker. So he's out again. Right. You have somebody they say that they like who is clearly not as talented in Elijah Hicks. What does that mean the defense may have to sacrifice with a backup at that spot?
Well, the number one thing is you lose your enforcer. And I think every secondary needs an enforcer. You brought up Bobby Sanders. And with Brisker, what he does in terms of how he plays the game, the tempo he plays at, the urgency he plays with, the physicality he plays with. Look at the hit he had last week. That's as violent as a hit as you will see in today's NFL. That's about all they will allow. That's about the edge right there. I thought it was a clean hit. I thought it was a physical strike on contact. But you need those plays. You need them on tape, and you need opposing teams to see that. That's what he can do for your football team. Yes, he can cover. Yes, he can pressure. He can cut off the ball on the edge. But the number one thing you lose without him in there is your enforcer. And look, I had a lot of coaches say they liked me too, right? Okay, that doesn't mean I was good all the time, right? A lot of coaches say that. They like their backups. Of course they do. They're on the roster, but you are going to have not the same impact. There's no way you can. Now, the backup can come in and play good football for you, maybe have a couple impact plays, but I still think this Bears secondary will be a little different this week without Brisker on the field, and then you have to pair that with Trevor Lawrence, who finally played his best football last week against the Colts. Was efficient with the ball, was accurate with the ball. His mechanics were much more tight. He was much more willing to cut it loose at the third level. He played really good football. He's looking at the first 4 games of the season. Guys, he didn't have one game where he completed more than 60% of his throws. They really struggled on offense in Jacksonville. And that's a very quarterback-friendly offense under Doug Peterson. He sets up his quarterbacks with leveled reads, with quick throws, with scheme matchups outside the numbers, and Lawrence just wasn't playing at a level that would put them in a position to win. So let's see if he can play like he did last week against a much tougher matchup against the Bears and the Colts. But what impact in the secondary? And who can step up and play that role? Can it be a Kyler Gordon? Can it be a Kevin Byard? Can it be someone else that plays that enforcer role?
Travis Etienne has not had the best of starts this season as part of that struggling Jacksonville Jaguars offense. Meanwhile, the guy behind him, Tank Bigsby, has looked great. How concerning is that run game based on what we've seen with the Bears, and not necessarily their inability to stop the run, but just some of the issues that they've had the last few games?
Yeah, and the Bears are not a dominant run defense. It's all right to say that they're not. I think they're an excellent defense. I think against opposing quarterbacks, they're outstanding right now. But against the run defense, I would say they're an average run defense right now. They do need to get better. Need to get better in the A and the B gaps, especially. Now, ETN, I've always liked ETN because he's a dual threat player. He's got the short area juice to get to the second level. I think he's excellent in the open field. And with Bigsby, you're talking about someone who's drafted in the third round out of Auburn, played SEC football. He's got great contact balance. In the last 2 weeks, he's had 2 explosive play rushes. Okay, so that's one area that they're getting their explosive plays from right now is on the ground. So I do think if you're Doug Peterson, knowing what the Bears are, especially in the secondary and the second level against the pass, this might be a little bit more run-heavy game plan for them. One that takes more pressure off of Lawrence, but also allows them to control tempo and then to scheme their shot plays down the field.
Trevor Lawrence is, like you say, capable of making any throw.
Mm-hmm.
Why did his mechanics get better? It just seems so strange that at this point in his career, he would have slipped to the point where somebody that talented would need someone to say, hey, keep your back shoulder up, set your feet, keep your eyes down the field. I kind of don't get it why that would be an issue.
And that's hard to explain. And I agree with you, Dan. It is hard to explain because here's the thing about Trevor Lawrence. He has all the physical tools you want at the position, right? He has the size, he has the arm talent, he has great mobility. But I think if you look at the tape at the beginning of last year, the tape at the beginning of this year, because he did play good football in the end of last season, I think he took a step back. And it really comes down to technique and fundamentals, in my opinion. Now, some of the decision-making you can question as well. But when you are inaccurate with the football at this stage of your career, there has to be an issue for it. You don't just miss voluntarily, right? So the issue with quarterback play is usually your lower body. Is it tied to your upper body? Is your footwork right? Are you locking your front leg when you're releasing the football, forcing it to dive? Okay, are you sailing passes? And are you late with the football? There's a lot of things that go into that, but it doesn't add up because the talent level of Trevor Lawrence is so high. And this started back when he was at Clemson, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone already said this is going to be a top pick in the NFL draft because he had those tools, he had those traits you want at the position. So, I mean, I think that's a situation, Dan, where you have to be in the media room with him. You have to be watching film with him and seeing how he's coached because it should be better. And it should be, more importantly, Dan, much more consistent given his talent level.
And you look at the issues that the Bears have had in that run defense, a lot's been made of the quality of fall off in terms of rotations with the guys who don't start on the defensive line. Have you seen that in what you're seeing with the inability to stop in the A and B gaps that you just spoke on?
I think it's a combination of things. We've talked about Dexter and his pass rushing ability, and that's a 3 technique that gets off the ball and gets up the field. Okay, well, a lot of times when you get up the field as a pass rusher, now you can get a zone step and you can get knocked out of your gap. It can be simple things like that, being more consistent at the point of attack, not letting combos push you off the ball at times, you can see in the tape. And the other thing is tackling. Can you be a better tackling football team when you're cutting off the ball on the edge? There's a lot of things that go into it. And like we said, I don't think the Bears, our alarms are going off at Haugh about the run defense, but it can be better, and it needs to be better moving forward, especially because, like I said, with Jacksonville and Doug Peterson, if I'm scheming as the Bears right now, I want to limit the throwing volume for the quarterback. I don't want them dropping back. It's just and look, the Bears have changed defensively. They really have. I looked at the numbers today. I talked about Jacksonville split safety is at 64%. Right now, the Bears are 38.9%. I was kind of surprised with that number. We always think 2 deep coverage. They're getting to be more single high. They're playing more man coverage, I think, because of their personnel in the secondary that is outstanding and is competitive in terms of how they challenge wide receivers.
It's also because Jalen Johnson is taking away half the field. I keep telling you, he's amazing.
No, he's a very high-level player. There's no question about it. And Stevenson is someone that can challenge. And Gordon can challenge. Byard and Brisker can match the tight ends inside. They have very good personnel in terms of what they want to be from a defensive perspective. And when they want to, guys, play 2 deep in third and long situations in the red zone, they can do that as well. So it's a changing defense. I still believe Eberflus has the same philosophy in how he wants to coach defense, but they are changing in terms of their coverage tendencies because their personnel right now is that good in the secondary.
Matt, I want your player perspective here as a former player. They're heading into the bye week after this. Mm-hmm. They're either going to be 4-2 or 3-3, or I guess technically they'd be 3-2-1. But the difference between 4-2 and 3-3 at this point of the season, knowing you have your whole division schedule ahead of you, what is that in your eyes?
It's enormous. It is. There's a much different narrative about this football team. There's a much different feeling at Haugh when you get back if you're 4-2 compared to 3-3. And I've been on long flights when I played out in Washington, out west. You don't want to lose those games to get in the plane. I'm telling you right now, that will be a much different feeling if you get on the plane flying home from London after a loss compared to a win. And you want momentum going into the bye week. You absolutely want that. You want to walk in the house hall when you come back from the bye week and energize, knowing that you can make a run at this thing. And I'm not saying you can't do that at 3-3. We all know that's possible. But again, 4-2 is much different in terms of where you're looking forward for the rest of the season.
Matt Bowen, always outstanding. Appreciate the time.